Denny, we talked last year about how people could potentially live on an all-inclusive resort for less than
Yes.
it costs to live in a major U.S. city. And that was a fun episode. We got some good feedback about that. So let's have a conversation today about whether you can live on a cruise ship for less than it costs to live in a major U.S. city. And it turns out there are a couple ways to do it. They each have their pros and cons. But we're going to specifically dig into one way of doing it that theoretically lets you live on cruise ships full time for about $2,500 a month or 30 grand a year.
Brian, though, how much would it be if you were to pay for it and live
Yeah,
on
out of pocket.
a
Bare minimum, you're probably looking at around 135 grand a year to live
and
on a
that's
cruise ship if you're paying for
wow.
everything yourself, just out
Okay.
of pocket cash. So, that is more than it costs to live in a typical major city. You know,
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, when we talk about living on a cruise ship, we're assuming that you don't have a permanent house that you're paying a mortgage on or rent on. We assume that you don't have a car
Mhm.
that you're making car payments on, paying for car insurance, that you're not paying for food. That all of that is part of what you're paying for on the cruise, right? So, yeah, if you're paying out of pocket cash, 135 grand is probably a rough floor that you're looking at. Now, there's an influencer named Mario Salcedo in the travel world. He's known as Super Mario, in the cruise travel world, rather. He's sort of a niche expert, niche influencer, and he lives on around 100 grand a year, living full time on cruise ships.
Wow.
Now, yeah, so he does that largely through loyalty points, with sticking with, a single cruise line. And I think he's also getting seaside cabins and stuff. Like, I mean, I think he's living a slightly better lifestyle than the minimum, which would be an interior
Right.
cabin, like, with no windows. Um,
Ironically, I had a cousin that was a musician, and back in the day, he pretty much lived on a cruise ship, and that's what he did.
well,
And
and
they
that's
paid for
another
him to live on the cruise ship, plus paid for him to be a musician.
that is a great point. That that's another tactic that people can use to live really cheap full time on cruise ships, or almost full time on cruise ships, is to work on the cruise ship. Whether you are working as cabin crew, whether you're working as entertainment, like a musician. I actually had a friend when I lived in Lima and when I lived in Peru. I had a friend, an American guy, who had been a comedian, and he had gotten
Oh,
a
wow.
full time gig working on a cruise ship. And
That's
he
cool.
got kicked off that cruise ship. Actually, yeah, he got canceled for a routine that he did. But anyway, um, we won't go into that story. But yeah, and if you do that, then you can live very inexpensively on the cruise ship. They will often still charge you for food, but not for accommodations. Or maybe they'll provide the basic food package, but they won't provide alcohol. All that kind of stuff. But the way that we're going to dig into today is a little bit more off the beaten path. The way that there's a couple influencers out there, YouTubers, who live for around 30 grand a year on
Wow.
cruise ship full time. Like, they cruise full time. One of them does like 60 cruises a year to make that happen. I mean, he cobbles
What?
together a ton of these. Or no, I think it's Linnell, actually. So the two YouTubers that we're going to mention as examples here are Linnell from Poverty to Paradise is her YouTube channel. And we'll link to these in the show notes. And Kevin of 30 and a Wake Up is his YouTube channel. And they mostly get free cruises through gambling. So they, gaming the system, if you will. Yeah. So
Not
they,
sitting at a table and hopefully winning, right?
no, not living off their winnings. No, they're not professional gamblers in that sense. Although I did know a professional gambler when I lived in Brazil. Uh, he was an online poker player. Anyway, getting sidetracked with these little anecdotes. Yeah, so no, they're not professional gamblers. They play the bare minimum of, it's normally slots, I think is what they play. They play the bare minimum to get comped trips on these cruise lines. So they typically stick with one cruise line rather than bouncing to among different cruise lines, because they've built up the gambling points, or the however the comp system works with the cruise lines. And there's a handful of cruise lines that do offer the gambling comps. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, Carnival Cruise Line is one of them. Princess Cruise Line is another. There's one or two others as well that you can look up, and we'll link to an article about this from tipsfortravelers.com as well, that does go into a little bit more detail about exactly which cruise lines offer the gambling perks and so forth. But, what these two YouTubers did is, they put in upfront, some of that gambling FaceTime, basically, getting seen playing the slots or playing tables. And so then they started getting offers, right, from the cruise line saying, "Hey, take a free 7-day cruise, in the
Uh-huh.
Caribbean." So it works. So it cost them about 30 grand a year to live full time on these cruises. Again, cobbling together, cruise after cruise after cruise.
Which isn't
Um,
bad at all.
no, no, and now they do still have to pay for taxes and port fees. So, and that is included in that 30 grand a year that they're paying for living expenses. They also typically do pay for the alcohol packages that they do. And if you've ever been on a cruise, you know that there's the basic food package, and then they'll have like the restaurants where you pay extra. So, these guys are living on just the basic food package, right? So something to keep in mind. Now, that being said, both Linnell and Kevin, they do receive some onboard credit as well with these bookings to cover some onboard costs like drinks or gratuities, that do add up over time. So, they do, as part of the gambling perks that they get, they do get some of these onboard credits. And now, and these guys are not, degenerate gamblers, of course. They're doing this very strategically, and they're doing the bare minimum that they have to in order to secure the free cruises, basically.
That's
And
cool.
again, it's not completely free, right? You have to pay the port fees and the taxes and stuff. Now, these
What
guys
other
also,
ways are there?
well, one of the things that helps, 30 grand a year is still not living for free, right? You still have some
Right.
costs. So these guys do earn some money from their YouTube channels. And, their YouTube channels are a form of income for them. This is a business for them. They're a content business as YouTubers. They also have passive income from investments, right? And, that's part of what you and I talk about all the time on this show.
Right.
How to stack up those, multiple streams of passive income from different investments. We obviously talk a lot about passive real estate investments because that's what we do in the co-investing club, where we get together every month and we vet them together, and then we go in on them together as a club. But you also earn
And
passive income
passive
from stock.
means, right? You can go on a ship because you don't have to worry about the toilets, the tenants, and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not a landlord. You're not. Yeah, like you said, not messing around with tenants and toilets and termites and all that stuff. No, it's totally passive. And of course, some people are interested in building a real estate investing business themselves. Buying rental properties, renovating them, renting them out, and keeping them as rentals and becoming landlords. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just not what we do in our co-investing. That is a side business that some people want to get into, but it
Oh
is a
yeah.
business and it takes time, it takes some labor. So yeah, passive income streams certainly help. So, and it doesn't take that much necessarily to create 30 grand a year in passive income streams. So just a quick example to highlight that point. A month or two back, Denny in the co-investing club, we looked at a fund and we ended up investing in this fund. It was a land flipping fund, which we've invested in before, by the way, and we brought it back and invested again because we liked it so much. But the fund pays a 16% distribution yield, and it pays it out, every quarter like clockwork. So
Mhm.
at 16% yield, at a 16% income yield, it would take less than 200 grand in invested money to generate 30 grand a year in income. Now, obviously you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and yada, 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 but we're just
Right.
highlighting a point here that, for less than 200 grand, someone could generate 30 grand a year
Which
to
is
go live on a cruise ship, right? For the rest of their days.
very
um,
cool. It is cool. Would you? Would you want to live on a cruise ship?
yeah, I would not. I would have no interest whatsoever.
I
I went
couldn't.
on. No, I mean, it's cramped. You'd get cabin fever, I mean, literally. I don't know. You'd probably get sick of the institutional food. I mean, I like to cook. So,
Mm.
that would be out the window if I were living on a cruise ship. So I personally wouldn't want to do it. But the point really is that we're just encourage you to think outside the box, right? Bucks outside
Right.
the box. And there's a ton of creative things you can do, both on the adventure lifestyle side, on the saving money side, on the building streams of passive income side. And of course, these guys are also, they have active income as well as YouTubers, which is, also a creative way of making money, while they're living this adventure lifestyle. Now, I do love, travel, and I lived abroad for 10 years and I love it. But living on a cruise ship, not for me, but, it is appealing for some people. Deni, would you want to live on a cruise ship?
Brian, I get seasick, so
Oh, I guess that's
probably
enough.
not.
Although cruise ships, they're so big that they actually don't rock very much. Like they're pretty stable because they're just so huge, especially the biggest ones. But I hear you. Not for everybody. Deni, is there anything else that you want to add before we call this episode complete?
No, I just love that the creativity. And if you have desires and things like that, you can invest, you can do all these things that you love and save money if you're creative enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And guys, if you got a fresh perspective out of this episode, please pass it on to friends, family members, neighbors, colleagues who might get a kick out of it. And if you're not familiar with how passive real estate investments work, we have a free course on it. It's 8 episodes. They're all super short, like 5 to 10 minutes a piece, just breaking down how passive real estate investments work. 5 different types of passive real estate investments that most people are not familiar with. We're not talking about REITs here, right? So anyway, check that out, sparkrental.com/free. And on that note, we will catch you on the flip side.